In a move least expected by many Nigerians, President Muhammadu Buhari, during the week, carried out a slight cabinet reshuffle, dropping 2 ministers and redeploying 2. Saleh Maman, Minister of Power, and Sabo Nanono, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, were both shown the way out of the Federal Executive Council. Femi Adesina, spokesperson to the president, explained that the 2 ministers were not removed due to poor performance, has been insinuated in some quarters. He said the decision was to consolidate on what he described as legacy performance and projects of the Buhari administration. Joining me now to discuss these and other topical issues is a senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana. Good to have you on the show, Mr. Falana. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ruben. Except to say that when you were talking of international affairs, you didn't talk of the coup d'etat that has just occurred in Guinea, Conakry.
Oh, Guinea, Conakry. Well, any attempt to violate the constitutional order
just a few minutes ago,
is of course unacceptable.
The coup plotters succeeded, and they have announced the removal of the government. The President Alpha Conte is right now in detention, in the custody of the military.
Well, let's start with that. What are your thoughts on it? I already said any attempt to violate the constitutional order is, of course, unacceptable and a violation also of the ECOWAS protocols.
Well, it's unfortunate that the coup is against the ECOWAS protocol on democracy and good governance, as well as the African Charter or the constitutive act of the African Union. But unfortunately, the African Union and the ECOWAS turned the other eye when President Alpha Conte manipulated the constitution of Guinea and gave himself a 3rd term. And during the election, people were killed. During the protests against the manipulation of the constitution, people were killed. And the ECOWAS leadership, as well as the African Union leadership, simply allowed him. And unfortunately, this is the price to pay for misgovernance and manipulation of the constitution, rigging of elections in Africa.
But what...
Again, the African Union is in trouble. It's going to lead to problems. When you had the coup in Mali, Mali was suspended from the African Union. But when you had the coup in Chad, Chad was not suspended. We are going to see what the African Union will do now with the new set of coup plotters in Guinea.
Well, I mean, we have...
Very unfortunate.
Yeah, we have reports to the effect that the fate of President Alpha Conde is uncertain. But what advice will you give to ECOWAS and African Union in this circumstance? You recall that in 2018 when there was a similar...
I can tell you that the fate of President Alpha Conde is certain. He is safe and alive. He's in detention and currently undergoing interrogation.
But
my advice to the African Union and the ECOWAS, is to wake up from their slumber and defend the democratic processes in Africa. Ensure that sit-tight leaders are not allowed to manipulate the constitutions of their country by giving themselves 3rd terms against the relevant instruments of the region, and support the struggle of the people against authoritarian rule.
Yeah, but about 27 minutes ago, the defense minister of Guinea-Conakry was saying that the efforts of the coup plotters has been thwarted and that the government is still in place. But I get a point about the lessons that you're drawing. Maybe perhaps it's still a developing story or not?
Well, actually, it's a strange coup. It's a very strange coup d'etat. The shooting started at 6 a.m. this morning. And by 1 hour ago, the coup plotters, a corner addressed the nation, and people are jubilant, unfortunately. The president is already in detention. I think this kind of counter-announcement will not lead to more killings in that country. But this is why the ECOWAS leadership have to quickly intervene, I mean, as well as the African Union, to see how to bring normalcy, restore normalcy in that country.
Okay, thank you very much, Femi Falana, SAM. But let's come back to the situation here in Nigeria.
Home.
Not too long ago, the president of Nigeria relieved 2 ministers of their portfolios. And this was meant to be, according to Femi, additional, a continuous process, which means that we expect more ministers to be relieved of their positions. Well, do you think this is a good development? Are you impressed with the description of the effort as a cabinet reshuffle, or do you think that this is too little, too late?
Well, with profound respect to the president, I'm not sure that Nigerians are in any way impressed. It's too late in the day, and perhaps it's too little. The regime has about 20 months to go. I think there's a lot of motions without movement. The removal of the 2 ministers will not change the neoliberal economic policies of the government. Policies that are promoting poverty and unemployment in the country, programs that are promoting insecurity in the country. And so Nigerians are not likely to see any change, which is like what we have been going through since 2015. This is a government of change. But from what we have seen, I think it's a government of, not really addressing any of the problems confronting the country. So the removal of the 2 ministers is not likely to impact positively on the development in the country.
Well, if you say that it's too late, it doesn't go far enough, and there are some other ministers that you think that the president of Nigeria should turn adrift if it's to achieve the objective of consolidating on his legacy, which is one of the reasons we were given for this, latest development.
No, frankly speaking, I think the regime really needs to go back to the drawing table. We're talking of insecurity in the country that we have never seen before. A prominent traditional ruler has just been kidnapped in Niger State. The wife of a legislator has just been kidnapped in Katsina State. The father of the secretary of the government and some member of his family in Katsina State have just been kidnapped. And kidnappings are going on all over the place. Shore's younger brother was killed yesterday. And the story of insecurity in the country is simply amazing. And, so the removal of 2 ministers, frankly speaking, cannot address any of the problems confronting the country. And when you are talking of legacies, again, what legacies? Of insecurity, of kidnapping, of banditry, whatever you call it, of terrorism, of unemployment, of poverty. What legacies? So that is why Nigerians are wondering whether the removal of the 2 ministers will have any significant impact on governance in the country. Speaking for myself, we are dealing with a system that promotes underdevelopment, the wholesale adoption of neoliberal policies dictated by the IMF and World Bank cannot be challenged with the removal of 2 ministers.
Okay, I see you don't want to mention names of ministers that you think should also be...
No. I mean, again, frankly speaking, I don't want to mention names because, I'm not an advisor to the government, but talking seriously, if you look at the degrading of the ministers, the analysis of each of the ministries. Can you be talking of 2 ministers as having not performed?
Anyway, okay, let's talk about something else, which is the NBA condemning the abuse of ex parte orders by persons who are supposed to be officers in the Temple of Justice, and the Chief Justice of Nigeria summoning 6 chief judges to appear before the NJC to find out why ex parte orders have been abused. We've seen this with regard to the PDP matter involving Prince Uche Secondus, the chairman of the party, with a judgment in Port Harcourt showing up in Kebbi, and then another high court giving another order in Calabar, courts of coordinate jurisdiction. And despite the intervention of the CJN and also the protest by the Nigerian Bar Association, in the last week, we've seen again other courts, at least one court, also issuing ex parte order. In fact, 2 courts in the last few days, without any regard for the outcry out there. So why are the judges refusing to listen to objections about ex parte orders?
Well, in the first place, and this has to be understood by all and sundry, the powers of granting ex parte orders or interlocutory orders. Ex parte order means, a temporary intervention by the court. The powers are vested in the courts to intervene when a matter is of extreme urgency to prevent some irreparable damage, from being done before the other side is put on notice. In other words, if a house is going to be demolished and you have a notice from the government and you want to go to court before the defendants have served the processes, an irreparable damage may have been done in the sense that the house may have been demolished. And so you can rush to the court to say, please, can you stop in the interim the damage, colossal damage, irreparable damage that may be done to my property? And the court will simply, of course, having regards to the fact before the court will be very careful and will be very reluctant in intervening. And if the court has to intervene, it will be ordered that the status quo ante be maintained pending when the other side will come, or an interim order is granted, restraining the defendant from proceeding with the intended action until they are put on notice. Again, it's supposed to be within 7 days. Now, that is part of our law. And so, you cannot abolish ex parte orders because there are times when they are of necessity. But no, you can't grant an ex parte order in what the Supreme Court referred to as self-induced urgency in the case of Central Bank of Nigeria and Kotoye. But the abuse, the gross abuse of ex parte orders in Nigeria started under the Ibrahim Babangida junta when the shadowy organization called Association for Better Nigeria was encouraged in Abuja, was allowed in Abuja in defiance of a valid and substituting order of the Lagos High Court, not ex parte, obtained via motion or notice. Now, the government in Abuja wanted to stop the election, and so ABN was used to obtain an ex parte order. And what happened? And that was against Section 19 of Decree 25 of 1987, which provided that no orders of court could stop the election. But the government got away with it. And what happened? In Lagos, in Plateau State, in Edo State, and I think 1 or 2 other states, counter ex parte orders were issued. And INEC simply said, in the midst of this confusion, orders of coordinate jurisdiction, we are going to act in accordance with the decree, section 19, and INEC went to conduct the election. But as the results of the election were being announced, the government, again, using the same Association for Better Nigeria, got the court. No judge was prepared to intervene, but they got the chief judge of the Federal Capital Territory, the late Justice Saleh, to issue another ex parte order suspending the further announcement of the results. The matter will have ended in the Court of Appeal because INEC appealed. And I think the winner of the election, Chief Femi Falana, appealed. And as the Court of Appeal was sitting on the 23rd of June, 1993, the lawyer to the military junta, the late Chief NDDC, announced in the court, I have just been informed that the decree has been issued in Abuja, cancelling any case, annulling any case that had to do with the annulment of election. And that was how the dangerous precedent was created. Unfortunately, no judge was brought to book because they were acting on the orders of the government. The first order was issued by the late Justice Basi Ikpeme. Again, under the current political dispensation, the Obasanjo regime started again this practice with labor under the leadership of Adams Oshiomhole. The government, there was a time NSC was going on strike. The government rushed to court and got an ex parte order in Ikeja here, which the then president of the NSC, Comrade Adams Oshiomhole, referred to as black market injunction. And again, that has now percolated the political system. Even the same Adams Oshiomhole, when he was going to be removed, it was through an ex parte order. And that is also what has happened to the chair of the PDP, Mr. Secundus, you know. Now, what does this all mean? Oh, by the way, the Chief Justice has invited the chief judges of the affected state, not the judges that issued the ex parte orders. Mind you,
yes,
none of the chief judges issued any ex parte order.
That's true.
So I cannot predict what the NJC intends to do yet, but we have a precedent. I think it was in 2006 when an ex parte order was used to remove a sitting governor in Anambra State. I think it was Dr. Chris Ngige, before he was eventually and properly removed by the Court of Appeal.
Was it the former CJN? Sorry to interrupt you.
Removing him from office. Of course, the NJC will not brook such, irresponsible abuse of power. And so the judge was tried and recommended for removal, and he was removed. So, but again, in the last few years, these conflicting court orders have oozed out of our courts, almost to the extent of, embarrassing the judiciary and exposing the judiciary to odium, public odium. I mean, how can anybody, for goodness sake, move to Kebbi State or Jigawa State or Kano State to restrain people either from conducting elections in primary elections in Anambra State? So the issuance of ex parte orders have become extremely embarrassing. And if care is not taken, and I think that is why the Chief Justice is intervening, if this trend continues, the 2023 election will be sabotaged, like what happened in 1993, by those who engage in forum shopping by looking for ex parte orders all over the place. So we have to put an end to it once and for all.
Well, but if we blame, as many have done, if we blame the judges, how about the lawyers themselves To what extent can the NBA go in sanctioning these lawyers who are engaged in forum shopping and who just lead on their political clients? And what could be the implications for the integrity of the democratic process? Because we see many of these ex parte orders being issued with regard to political matters.
Well, I've always appealed to the authorities of the legal profession not to discipline judges alone, because it takes two to tango. And in every given situation, a judge does not issue an order in vacuum. A lawyer must have filed an application. And you will be surprised that most of the lawyers involved in this forum shopping are very senior lawyers. So they know the law. They know the circumstances under which an ex parte order can be applied for. And so they deliberately, these lawyers, deliberately go around looking for judges that will grant them ex parte orders. And that's why we call it forum shopping. They will leave the jurisdiction and go about looking for, ex parte order judges. So for me, just like the NJC is trying to sanction judges that are involved, the Nigerian Bar Association must also compile reports and file applications before the legal practitioners disciplinary committee, so that on both sides we can put an end to the use of ex parte orders to sabotage the democratic process. In addition, we must also try as much as possible to remove the judiciary from deciding winners of election. We are now having a dangerous situation in our country where judges are made to decide who the executive members of a political party will be, who will run political parties, who will conduct, or who the candidates of political parties will be, and who will win elections in Nigeria. Once we involve the judiciary to such extent in the democratic process, we're in trouble. In other words, the electorate, the wishes of the electorate are no longer relevant, because the courts and the tribunals now decide who won elections in Nigeria. And that should not be so. We have never gone this bizarre in conducting elections in our country, and we must put an end to it.
Well, Mr. Falana,
and by the way, and this is very important, you can go to court to ask for an ex parte order that Dr. Reuben Abati is going to assume office in 2 days' time or tomorrow, and the election was not properly conducted. The court may grant an ex parte order or ask you, go and put him on notice. How can you grant an ex parte order and ask, go and put the person on notice for 2 weeks? Whereas you could have just go to the next office there and bring the person here. You can imagine the Federal Court in Abuja issuing ex parte orders against the INEC. INEC is just a stone's throw from the court. So the court can stand down the matter in the morning, go and serve the Director of Legal Services in INEC, and come here in the afternoon. But you cannot grant an ex parte order to remove somebody who has been in office for 2 or 3 years, or grant an ex parte order in August 2021 to restrain a man that will complete his term of office in December 2021. It's unheard of. You don't issue orders to restrain completed act. It's so trite in law. And that is why, once and for all, we must address this embarrassing situation.
Well, but do you think that the intervention of the CJNs, Chief Justice of Nigeria, and the NBA will make any difference, considering the fact that we've been on this matter of abuse of court process?
For sure. Yeah. Because it has been done before.
Yeah, but we've been on it since 1985.
I just recall how Justice
As far back as 1985.
Energy was removed for granting an ex parte order to remove a sitting governor.
Well,
and that checked the practice for some years until we went back now.
Okay, I get your point.
And so that is why this is the time for both the bar and the bench to put their house in order.
But what we also read in the papers is that this is a case of grand corruption within the judicial system. As a member of the inner bar, will you say, yes, that allegation is correct? Because I've seen cartoons showing a judge, with a bell, proclaiming injunctions for sale and looking for buyers.
For sale.
Yes.
No, I think for both the bar and the bench, such cartoons and a lot of comments in the social media have challenged the relevant authorities to really ensure that we apprehend this crisis, address it, and ensure that the ugly development does not become the culture of our country. And I think that is why I cannot, speaking as a senior lawyer, say that these orders are issued on the basis of corruption or payment of certain sums of money. I do not have such evidence. But you can, as a media person, based on your investigation, make such an allegation. But I cannot, because I must deal with evidence. And I do not have the evidence yet to link any judge with corrupt practices. But as far as the judiciary is concerned, going by the records of the NJC, there are times when, having regards to the facts and circumstances of a given case, a judge can be said to have abused his judicial powers or high judicial powers, and on the basis of that, such judges have been recommended for sanction in the past. So that may happen this time around.
Well, let's talk about something else, which is the report on the audit of the NDDC, the Niger Delta Development Commission, which was ordered in 2019 by President Muhammadu Buhari. And we've been told that over a period, Nigeria lost up to about 3 trillion. And if we stretch it all the way back, Nigeria lost up to about 6 trillion naira, money that could have been used for development purposes, and that over about 13,777 projects were not handled. 77 of them were hurriedly completed. What do you think of that report? Do you think that there is any hope that government will be able to apply the necessary sanctions and ensure that the NDDC, the Niger Delta Development Commission, eventually achieves its original purpose?
Again, I'm not quite optimistic that anything will come out of the report because there have been more revealing allegations of corruption in the past, and at the end of the day, nothing happened. I can recall the presidential panel on arms procurement, and according to the Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, up to $15 billion earmarked for procurement of arms was criminally diverted by a coterie of military officers. And really, nothing has happened to majority of them. Under President Jonathan, it was revealed at a stage that contracts worth about 5 trillion naira were not executed. The ICPC, the EFCC have also come out regularly to talk of abandoned projects by particularly constituency projects by National Assembly members. At the end of the day, out of sheer class solidarity, nothing happened to those who were indicted. So this time around, I cannot see any basis, why we should really be very hopeful. More so, that the report was not submitted to the president that set up the panel, but I think it was submitted to the Attorney General, not to the EFCC, to prosecute those who were indicted. So, and that is why I would rather urge the oppressed people of Niger Delta region to demand for the publication of the reports so that all those who are responsible for abandoning projects in the place, in those states, will be apprehended and asked to go and either complete those projects or prosecuted, or be prosecuted. But relying so much on the government to fight the monstrosity in the Niger Delta, I'm not quite sure. More so, there is nobody in place. You have an interim committee running the NDC, for over 2 years. Again, that's an illegality. So the government will have to put a board in place, send this report to the EFCC to deal with those who have been indicted, so that the EFCC can call all of them. Go back and complete projects that have been abandoned, or we charge you before the courts. So I think this is the way to go. Again, from snippets coming out, from the report, we are being told now that about $4 billion have not been paid by some of the oil companies. Again, I think that is money that can easily be collected in a few days, so that we can have something like a Marshall Plan for the development of the Niger Delta. Again, it's the same. In that report, I haven't seen the trillions of naira not paid to the account of the Niger Delta by the federal government. So the report has to be published so that members of the public can assist in ensuring that we address the problems of the neglect of the Niger Delta region through the NDDC. And this time around, the National Assembly will need to amend the NDDC Act so that the representatives, accredited representatives of each of the states, will be represented on the board, and not nominees of political parties or the ruling party.
Well, with regard to membership of the board, Kabir Ahmed, the lead auditor, is recommending managerial and structural changes. He is also saying that membership of the board should be a part-time engagement, although a group in the Niger Delta had already pointed out that, in fact, out of the 16 members, that about 13 of them are actually, part-time members, and it's only 3 persons that are full-time executive members of the board. But what do you think of Kabir Ahmed's recommendation? And then, secondly, you raised the point about a report being presented by Godswill Akpabio, the Minister of Niger Delta, to the Attorney General of the Federation. Not to the President, not to the Vice President. But is that really a problem? What if the President delegated?
It is a problem.
What if the President delegated?
What is done by government since 1914?
No,
what is done is to have a white paper. You must have a white paper for implementation.
But for the presentation.
Report. I mean, it's just like the report on EFCC. I'm talking of Justice Salami's report. No. You must have a white paper produced by the government for the implementation of the report, so that the report is not challenged. And that is what is done. And it cannot be done by the president. The Attorney General didn't set up the committee. But since it's an audit report, it ought to have been passed to the EFCC through the Auditor General of the Federation, so that we can do things properly. There is a constitution. Section 85 provides for the office of the Auditor General. But look at what has happened. Since 1999, the office of the Auditor General has been reduced to an NGO. I mean, when you read the report of the Auditor General now, it's like reading the report of the SERAP or CDHR or HIDA. Nobody pays attention any longer. So you can't talk of allowing the board without seriously advertising contracts, without also insisting that certain projects be carried out by the Federal Ministry of Works or the Niger Delta Ministry or the communities themselves. This business of contract award, or what was referred to under the Shagari regime as contractocracy. You know, the government of contractors. We can't go on like that. We used to have public works department in the Ministry of Works to fix our roads. But now, unqualified contractors are given these jobs, and at the end of the day, after mobilization and after sharing the money, they simply disappear. And that's why I'm going to plead with the people of the Niger Delta, get a hold of this report and ensure that all the road projects that have been abandoned, electricity projects that have been abandoned, we must get the civil society people, SERAP and others, find out who the directors of these companies are, and then ensure that they are brought to book. The government cannot, for goodness sake, it's going to be difficult for the government because some of the contractors are members of the ruling party.
Well, but I mean, I still need further clarification on that point about the Attorney General of the Federation representing the president in receiving the report. Is it because he was receiving the report from a colleague? Is that the problem? Or perhaps the president may have directed, considering the fact that, look, we're not even talking about the report. I saw on the screen earlier on, he was submitting jute bags, you know, containing documents. Perhaps the Attorney General's assignment is to first review it before reverting to the president.
No, Ruben. This is a government that is supposed to be run on the basis of transparency. You and I cannot be speculating. Why was this report submitted to the Attorney General and not to the President? So the regime has to clarify that. And then the regime has to tell us what is going to be done by the government that set up the report. I mean, the panel of inquiry. So I'm not guessing here. And I'm not in any way trying to demean the office of the Attorney General. But I'm just saying that we must learn to do things properly. You can't set up a judicial commission of inquiry. Its report is submitted. No committee is set up to produce a white paper. And we should be taken to council for implementation. And you are now implementing the report secretly. No, it's not part of our law. And there are a legion of cases on this matter. That once the government has set up a panel of inquiry, there is a method, there are ways of implementing the recommendation. The recommendations have to be accepted by the government through a white paper. And the Attorney General, with profound respect, cannot do that. No.
Okay, well, let me ask you another question relating to fundamental human rights. The federal government is saying that it's planning to make compulsory COVID-19 vaccination compulsory, starting with civil servants, once it can establish that there is enough supply of COVID-19 vaccines. And in Edo State, the state government has also said, well, for you to access certain state services or access public buildings, you must also be vaccinated. as is done in some other parts of the world, in Europe and parts of the United States. But in the case of Edo State, one Osareti has gone to court, not in Benin, in some distant place, to stop the Edo State government from moving ahead. And all of this has to do with the conflict between human rights and public health and public safety. Where do you think we should draw the line?
Well, I'm not going to be able to comment on the case filed in Port Harcourt because I've been briefed by the Edo State government, to intervene in that case. But talking about compulsory vaccination or the directive of the government in Edo State, and I think Ondo State now, that members of the public will not be able to access certain services of the government unless you can show that you have been vaccinated, your certificate of vaccination. And the federal government, I think the government is flying the kite, so that members of the public can comment. Legally speaking, these orders are proper. Because what people are complaining about here, you are violating my right to liberty, you are violating my freedom of choice, you are compelling me to take vaccination contrary to my own wish and desire. In this circumstance, because of the contagious nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're talking of a disease that is airborne. The health of the entire society is in danger. And so, if you look at Section 35 of the Constitution, which provides that the right to personal liberty can only be infringed upon by the government in accordance with a procedure permitted by law. That section provides that your right to liberty can be seized by the government if it is for the purpose of treating a contagious disease, if it is for the purpose of confining you, whether you suffer from depression or insanity. And I remember, I think it was the case of the Ezakiza case. I mean, the government came to the court and said, when we're challenging their detention, we are keeping them for protective, we are putting them in protective custody. And the trial judge asked me, what is your reply? I think the Honorable Justice Gabriel Kolawole of the Court of Appeal. And I said, my Lord, no. You can only put children in protective custody or adults who have been identified or diagnosed with contagious diseases. But there's no way you can just grab somebody and say you are protecting him in your custody. And of course, the court agreed with our submission. There is a Nigerian case that people have not properly studied. The case of Medical and Dental Practitioners Tribunal and Dr. Okonkwo, which has to do with whether you can compel somebody to have blood transfusion. The Supreme Court examined the laws, our Constitution, and said, yes, while it is your right, why you have the right to refuse blood transfusion on religious ground, and which nobody can challenge. If there is a disease that may affect the society, the government can compel vaccination. In some of the cases that have been handled in Europe, I think Brazil and a few countries, this issue of your personal freedom vis-a-vis the freedom of the society, has come up for determination. I mean, the European Court on Human Rights has clarified the point that parents cannot refuse vaccination for their children when you're talking of polio and some diseases, because those children are going to mix with other pupils in the school. And so, and that those laws are in line with, democracy. In Brazil, the Supreme Court of Brazil has also made the point that people can be compelled to be vaccinated to save the entire society. In Nigeria, since early last year, the federal government and each of the state governments in Nigeria rolled out the directions that are compulsory. We must wear face mask, you must wash your hands, and so on and so forth. And so nobody has gone to court to say, oh, why I'm a lawyer, why should you compel me to wear a face mask? So if the government has now gone further, because we now have the Delta variant that is more dangerous than other variants. In fact, another one has just been identified now, MU. And we do not know how far we are still going to go. Even those who have been vaccinated can still contract the disease. So that shows how dangerous, how contagious the COVID-19 pandemic has become. And therefore, the government, every responsible government, has a duty to save the life of every citizen or everybody in Nigeria. And I think that is the basis of this intervention.
Well, but I get your point that there is a legal basis for it, government's responsibility. But two major groups in the health sector, the Nigerian Medical Association and also the Joint Health Staff Unions, the JOHESU, they are saying that it doesn't make sense to say that vaccination must be compulsory because people can, if they so choose, in fact, reject even medical treatment, as we have with some persons of particular, faiths in the country. What do you think of that? Because the NMA is saying that if the government goes ahead with sanctions, because Dr. Faisal Shaibu of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency was talking about sanctions, likely sanctions. Now, can an individual just decide not to take the vaccine and, he will say, well, he doesn't believe in the vaccine. His faith, for example, does not allow him to take any form of vaccination. Is JOHESU right? Is the NMA right?
I think the government is being well guided in this regard.
You said?
No, I think the government is being careful in this regard. The government is simply saying, yes, you have your right if you don't want to take the vaccination, or the vaccines, but if you are going to ask for the services of the government, you must show evidence. Just like traveling to some countries now, you are required to show your certificate, evidence that you have been vaccinated. So we just have to look at the state of the law. As far back as 1926, we have been dealing with pandemics. And that year, the law was enacted that during pandemics of this nature, the government can issue directives to compel people on how to handle our affairs. And with respect to the position of the NMA and the JOHESU, I'm sure when they contact their lawyers, some of these issues will be made very clear. And I've just cited the case that even involved the NMA. It was the NMA that referred the case to the Mendel and Dental Disparity Tribunal. And the Supreme Court, the case went as far as the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yes, you have the right to refuse transfusion as a person. But if your refusal of treatment is going to affect the society, the government can intervene. And I think that is the point.
Okay, I'm dwelling a bit.
That is the law today.
I'm dwelling on this a bit because I know you have a group, an advocacy group with regard to COVID-19. But some people say in Nigeria, and very briefly, that perhaps what Nigeria should adopt is a measure adopted in some other parts of the world, whereby people are given incentives to get vaccinated. Instead of talking about sanctions, shouldn't the Nigerian government be giving out some kind of incentives? In some countries, they give you $100 if you get vaccinated. If you assist people to go to the vaccination center, you get $50. And I have advocated on another program that perhaps if they begin to serve rice, jollof rice, and amala and gbegiri at vaccination centers, people will be incentivized to go out there and take the... So we should confess the incentives or this threat of sanctions?
Before I address your question, let me say this. When Kogi and the governors of Kogi and Cross River State, when I discovered that they denied the existence of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think our organization, ASCAP, filed an action against them in court, which is still pending. We're trying to compel the center, to go to those two states and ensure that people are treated. I mean, that the necessary tools are put in place to reduce the effect of the pandemic. Now, because we have evidence of people who have been killed by the disease in those two states, and the case is still in court. I hope both state governments have now quietly dropped the denial. I mean, they were living in denial, but that's no longer the case. On incentives, beyond giving people $50 or $100, by the way, I'm sure you know what $100 means in Nigeria today. It's over 50,000 naira. About 530,000 naira. I mean, 53,000 naira. But I think what we are saying here, what other countries have done, is also to give to the people, to transfer cash to the vulnerable members of the public. Even America, the bastion of capitalism, has on about 3 occasions paid money, transfer funds to the accounts of vulnerable people. Here, the government claims, I think, to have spent about $3.6 billion on the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, we are trying to ask for details. I'm talking from ASCAP. Where have you spent this money on? So we're asking questions in that direction. So beyond asking people to come and take, 5,000 or 10,000 or to prepare rice at the venue of, the hospital. No. I don't think we should humiliate our people. The government should do the needful. Try as much as possible to convince people and let them see the need for vaccination. Get community leaders to stop miseducating our people. Get social media to stop forwarding dangerous, conspiracy theories. And I think I was reading, whether it's Australia or something, where one of the branches of the churches of a church in Nigeria has been asked to pay a fine of about $135,000 for denying the existence of COVID-19, pandemic. So I think the government will have to devise various means of educating our people, of enlightening Nigerians, of convincing Nigerians why they should take the vaccines. And let people know the efficacy of the vaccines.
Well, thank you very much, Femi Falana, SAN, for joining us on This Day Live, this Sunday talk show. Thank you very much indeed for your insights.